Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dean Rogers Show. Today, we've got Zach Lemaster. What's up, Zach? Of
Hey, Dean, I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
course, dude. No, I'm excited to dive in as well. And, we're going over a really good topic today, talking about rentals, building wealth, and your company, Rent to Retirement, is all about that. So I'm excited to peel back the onion on that. For those that don't know Zach, he's the founder, CEO of Rent to Retirement, which is a turnkey real estate investment company. We'll dive more into that, break that down if you don't know what that is. But Zach is experienced in all areas of wholesaling, flipping, buying rentals, single family houses, multifamily, commercial, new construction. Really impressive background of all the different stuff that he has done and is still doing. And started his career out as an optometrist and got into real estate, retired in his 30s with real estate from the optometrist job. And so really cool story about how you got here, and look forward to sharing more about it, man. So if you guys want to connect with Zach, you guys can find him on Instagram. You can go to Rent to Retirement Invest and check his account out there. Make sure to follow him and be in touch with him. So Zach, excited to dive in, man.
Yeah, Dean, this is great. You have a very inspiring story. We had you on our show recently, and I know that there's a lot of people who are like, "Wow, that's awesome." And so I'm happy that I get to return the favor here.
Of course, man. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you here. So your business, Rent to Retirement, is all about building wealth through rentals. Now, the light bulb went off for me about 5 years ago, realizing that I was just on a hamster wheel. I was investing in real estate. I was having some success, some mistakes here and there. We all have like some bumps and bruises. I had some early big bumps and bruises, but I was really figuring things out. I realized if I wanted to be wealthy, if I wanted to have generational wealth, if I wanted to be able to retire, because I did not believe in the 401k retirement plan, that I needed to do what the wealthy people did. They own real estate. So tell me kind of what it is that Rent to Retirement is, how you came across that, and how you run the business today.
Certainly, and I'm going to give you a quick backstory on myself, Dean. And I know you gave me a great intro, but I think that ties into just like the foundation of our company, Rent to Retirement. So, as you mentioned in the beginning, background in healthcare. My wife and I are both optometrists by education. We met in school. I was an Air Force captain for 7 years. I was on scholarship, and that's where I started investing in rental real estate. As many people do, read we call the Purple Bible, right? The Kiyosaki Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and read a bunch of his other stuff. But just started to change my mindset about how to think about money and investing. And first house I bought used a VA loan because I had access to that, which was great. Bought a duplex, lived in half, rented out the other half, and then kept doing it. There's a pivotal moment during our investing career, and this is probably 3 to 4 years in, Dean, where it really changed the trajectory of our lives and like our investing progression, certainly. And this is where we started to learn how to invest outside of our own backyard. I was stationed in North Dakota at the time, not the most attractive investment market across the country. I say I was deployed to North Dakota and the Great White North, but we started to learn how to invest in different areas, and that wasn't easy. That took a long time. We made a lot of mistakes and lost money to start, but we eventually learned how to do that, to be intentional on choosing the right locations, on where to invest, and how to build a portfolio diversified across some of the best locations in the country. And that led us to the point where we were acquiring rentals, growing our rents were appreciating quickly over time. The houses were appreciating. We traded those up and went to 1031 exchanges, but it all boiled down to investing in the right location and being intentional around that to allow us to retire from our career paths in medicine and be full-time real estate investors. That caught a lot of people's attention. Like, hey, we see what you're doing, investing in these different areas. We also like real estate, but we don't want to do all the work that you're doing and go through that. Can you just help us? Can we invest with you? Can we give you money? Whatever the case was. And that led to the foundation of Rent to Retirement, because we already had our teams and systems in place to be able to identify the best markets throughout the country and then invest in those areas. And so we just started to scale what we were already doing for ourselves for other people. And then the rest is history. But what we do at Rent to Retirement, we're a turnkey provider. And so we identify the best locations throughout the country, following the same process that has led us to be successful. And then we build teams in these areas, right? So we either renovate or build houses with our local teams in each one of these areas. And then we lease and manage those properties for investors so they can easily access the best locations throughout the country without having to, build their own team from the ground up. They're not having to actively manage, especially from a distance. And fast forward to where we're at today, we did just about 1,000 doors last year across 12 different markets.
It's crazy.
And yeah, we have just a lot. We do a lot of new construction, build to rent stuff too. So it's been a long journey.
Yeah. Uh, how do you know what a good market is?
There's a lot of criteria, and this has been developing over time as real estate is. It is a dynamic, investment and dynamic landscape across the U.S. Things are always changing, which is a good thing because that means there's new opportunity as well. When we try to identify a market, we have our criteria, like a whole laundry list of things that we fundamentally need, and then also the things we look for. We want to be in areas that, and I'll go through some of those, for example. So we want to be in areas that have landlord-friendly legislation. We know that there's a lot of excellent places to live and invest across the country, but there's some places that are just easier from a legislation standpoint. I won't name any states here, Dean, but some of our beautiful sunshine states might be challenging to evict tenants from. So we want to be in areas where
Yeah.
we can easily manage and own properties, areas that are tax friendly. We want to be in areas that have low home prices relative to rent prices, areas that have a diversity of industries, not just relying on, say, oil or gas. A lot of it comes down to supply and demand. If anything, like to sum up the conversation, supply and demand is the biggest thing. We want to be in an area where the population is moving, where there's an undersupply of housing. There's a crisis, a housing crisis in a lot of markets across the country. That also means there's a lot of opportunity to provide housing for people in need. And those are great areas to invest in. A lot of those are Southeast, but we also need areas to that cash flow, right? So we try to be below the $300,000 price point. The median house price point across the U.S. is $408,000. Today, we try to be below that because then we have the biggest tenant pool to choose from, and as well as home buyers as well. But there's a long laundry list that we try to look at, as well as where the developing and emerging markets are at, where there's opportunity.
Yeah. That's got to be the number one question. Where do I invest? Depending upon where you live, when you ask that question, the question might be, do I invest in my backyard? Do I invest in out of state? Myself living in California, the thought process is, well, it's too expensive to invest in California. I need to invest out of state. There'll be people that say, no, you need to invest in your backyard. And then many others that will say, no, you should invest where it makes sense. Right now, out of all the markets you're working in, what is your favorite market?
And I'll say just because it's my favorite does not mean it's the best market for everyone. I mean, one thing that we do is try to match markets with people's goals, criteria, price points, resources, et cetera. I really like the Southeast. These are generally growth markets. Last year, I would have said Southwest Florida was my favorite market, and that's where we actually do a lot of ground up construction, and we still do. That has transitioned to probably northern Alabama, with the corridor between Huntsville and Birmingham. I just see a lot of opportunity, especially with the job growth there. That I think we like the price points. Florida has gone through just this crazy appreciation wave, both in rents and home prices, and so it was fun to ride that. Now we're seeing a little bit of correction on that, so we look for the next area, and it's still a good market. Don't get me wrong, but we like areas where we can be kind of ahead of the trend.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot. I've heard Alabama's having a ton of job growth, a ton of market growth while still being very affordable. So it sounds like I've heard from many others that the Sun Belt states, the Southeast, is where there seems to be the best opportunities. Is there any other states outside of that are still really great markets that you're looking at and currently investing in?
We do a lot in the Midwest. These are just less sexy markets, I think they're sexy, but for different reasons. So I mean, we like Ohio. I like outside of Cincinnati and Cleveland areas. A lot what we're doing, Dean, right now is focusing on secondary markets. These are areas that they're commutable to large metropolitan areas, but they maybe have a population that's 30 to 60,000 people or something like this. They're not really a large, but they're commutable and they're a growing area. I mean, and COVID has completely changed the landscape as well, for where there's a lot of changes, where people are living, working remotely,
Hmm.
as people are developing their families and generations are changing as well. Just the mindset around home ownership and where they're living. So, but a lot of secondary markets outside of large metropolitan areas, I think there's a significant opportunity where you can get into a house that is a fraction of the price. I mean, a perfect example of this would be, I know I'm talking about the Midwest and bouncing between there and Southeast, but Florida, for example, one of our best markets is in Polk County, Florida. This is southwest of Orlando in a town called Point Siena, in Polk County. And this is an area where, you can be in downtown Orlando within 30 to 45 minutes, but the home prices are a fraction of the cost, but rents are still relatively comparable. And so you can build or buy a brand new construction house for 300 to 350,000 that's renting out for 27 to $2,800 a month and cash flowing quite well. And it still has tremendous growth opportunity. So looking at some of those opportunities outside of large metro areas that may also be too expensive. I mean, those are some areas that we like. But going back to the Midwest, this is your bread and butter areas that they're pretty stable. I mean, when people think about the Midwest, they think about stability, they think about affordability. You can be into a brand new constructed house or a renovated house in a good area for 150 or 200,000.
Mm.
So if you only have 20 to 30K to put down on a property, maybe that's a good entry point for you to just break into the game and start owning rental property, which is really what it's all about. I do want to mention one more thing, Dean, is that just to piggyback what you were saying earlier about investing locally, let me say this. There's nothing wrong with investing in your own backyard. I want to make that very clear. That's where I started, and I think that's where a lot of people start. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But every successful investor and wealthy person that owns rental real estate that we speak with over time, they're diversified. They're diversified across multiple asset classes. They are invested in different markets, and they build teams, or tap into teams to facilitate everything for them, right? So I just want to mention that as you look to scale, I think it is important to be conscious about where the best investment opportunity is across the country.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just because you start one place and you start where you're familiar with doesn't mean that you can't branch out and then find the next place. I think what you said there is the most important part of the equation that I've heard of when it comes to investing out of state is having the right team. Tell me more about that, how you guys are set up to support, as a turnkey investment company, you guys find the property, you guys remodel it or build it ground up construction, brand new, and then put a tenant in it and sell that asset over and then manage it, right? So, tell me what that experience is like and why that's such an important piece.
Yeah, and that's something that's overlooked, I think, so often with newer investors. Sometimes turnkey is one of these broad terms that's a buzzword, and people hear different things about turnkey or different opinions, different backgrounds, and sometimes I think they have a false sense of security as well. I want to call this point out because I think some people go into the idea of investing out of state when they're buying with a turnkey company like ours of like, oh, this is all going to be 100% hands off and there's no risk with this. And they're looking at a pro forma and they're saying, oh, well, this says $350 a month in rent. That's exactly what I'm going to get. I want to make it very clear that this is still real estate investing, right? And you're owning a rental property. You still need to go through proper due diligence. And real estate is real estate. There still is going to be variability. The goal of investing through a turnkey company would be to mitigate your exposure to risk, to tap into an immediate team where you don't have to build your own, and to have a higher propensity for success in rental real estate investing. So that's what we try to provide for our clients, is it easy access to deals nationwide for them where they can immediately tap into our teams, but also offer some mentorship to them to say, hey, this is how we would recommend building a business in rental real estate, having the right tax and legal structure in place. We're not just selling a property that's been built and leased. We're coaching people on how to build a business long term, right? And because that's, as you mentioned in the very beginning, I mean, wealth is created by holding on to assets and using real estate and using the tax advantages of rental real estate and making sure you're protecting your assets with the right legal structure in place, making sure that you have the right financing in place. And so we try to approach this from a comprehensive standpoint where we educate people on all these things, and then they can ultimately to make the decisions that they want to invest in, like which locations and how to structure their business. But this is still rental real estate. You're still housing people, and statistically speaking, it's just a matter of time before you have issues, and so we want to be there to help people walk through those. We don't manage any properties in house. We did at one point in time, but now we vet local property management teams that are hyper local to each location. We work with them ourselves, and then we make them available to people if they want to use those property management teams because we've been successful with them, which they don't have to. But that's generally how we try to work with people. Is it's more of building a business around rental real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of the horror stories of investing out of state and having the wrong property manager just take them to the cleaners, not even placing a tenant, overcharging for things, and just really just making it not a good experience. So I think having the right people you work with is fundamentally what's going to make it go well or not, right?
Yeah, local or otherwise. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
manage. That's just management or
that's
business
management.
partners in
Yeah,
general.
yeah, no doubt about it. So tell me, you touched on a couple scenarios of Southwest Florida, of Ohio, and what maybe some of the numbers might look like for. But tell me what a typical deal looks like. What makes a good deal? What do the typical numbers look like for that typical good deal, so that we can kind of get understanding like what does that look like?
Be happy to. I'm going to break this up into the two geographic locations that we kind of touched on earlier because I think the deals are different based on those two general areas. So Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, these are areas where we do mainly renovations on houses. There is some new construction. We have some duplexes in Kansas City coming up. We're almost done with, but these are houses that are probably on average $150,000 to $200,000 for 3 bedroom, 4 bath. It's your workforce housing, middle B class to upper B class location. A lot of times we'll work in suburbs of the main metropolitan area, as I mentioned previously. And rents, they're not at like that 1% rule as some people may hear, but they're high enough where you can put leverage on the property at 20 to 25% down and still get a good return on your investment from cash flow. In fact, usually better than some of the new construction, all things considered, because with the high rent and low home prices. So typical deal, $150,000 house, probably renting out $1,200 to $1,300 a month in rent, and that would produce, with leverage, depending on what kind of leverage you're using, probably a 8 to 10% cash on cash return, just the cash flow. That's the Midwestern deal. Now, on the flip side, we work in the Southeast where we do a lot of new construction ground up. This is single family and small multifamily. Home prices are much higher, probably about double, so $250,000 to $300,000 on average. But this is a brand new constructed house in an A class area where rents are still strong enough to produce positive cash flow, but they're probably going to be in that 5 to 6% cash on cash return right out of the gates. I personally love new construction, and that's like 80% of what we did last year in these areas because there's stronger growth and more predictability in them long term. And so these are going to be properties that will have strong appreciation both in rents and home prices year after year, significant predictability because you're attracting quality tenants and you are reducing your maintenance. And so those are the kind of the typical deals. Most people are using conventional financing, putting 20% down, on the single family, but you don't have to. We have one thing we pride ourselves on is creative financing. So we have some creative lending options. We do offer seller financing on an interest-only loan, a 2 to 4 year loan that's at a 3 or 4% interest rate that allows people to cash flow significantly if they won't need to access seller financing while they get their own financing sorted out, or if they don't want to go a conventional route. We have credit unions that will offer investor loans with as little as 5% down. And often when I say that, they're like, "Oh, do you mean for primary residence to live in?" And no, this is true investor loans. Most people have never heard of this,
Oh,
but you can buy investment properties with as little, and it used to be zero money down, but you can buy them with as little as 5% down, up to five investment properties. You still have to qualify for these, so you have to meet DTI requirements, but it's a portfolio loan that's held in-house with local credit unions that will finance new construction in growth markets. And so that's been a unique play where a lot of people have bought those. A lot of times they'll buy them just for tax purposes, and they'll run cost segregation studies on those to accelerate their depreciation and things like that. So we have a lot of unique deal structures that we work on with people.
yeah, I've done the DCSR loans, and those are typically uh, you're looking at 75 to 80% loan to value. Now, if you get the deal good enough, then that's great. You may or may not have to come out of pocket any money. Um, there was one I just closed on 2 weeks ago that I came out of pocket, I think $800, and that's the only money that came out of my pocket from buying it, remodeling it, and refinancing it. Only $800 of my own actual money was involved in that transaction between the
Was
private
that at
lender,
the end of the transaction
the
or
end,
on the
yeah,
acquisition up front? Okay.
yeah, on the very end. Um, so yeah, to hear 5%, I mean that could get pretty interesting as to what you could do, and opens up doors. And that's what I've heard in those Midwest, Southeast markets. The local credit unions is the go-to. So walk me through that. Is this just, you know, walking right in the door and just saying you want a loan and they know exactly what you're looking for? They know that they're ready and able to fund their local deal, or do you have to know the right type of people? How does that work?
One thing that we do is we have a whole Rolodex of different lenders out there in different locations that offer different products, and so we're excellent matchmakers with our investors with the right lenders, depending on because we learn what their goals and their strategy is to both get started and scale. And so if someone's a self-employed 1099 person, or they just started their business and they can't qualify for traditional financing, well, that puts you in a different loan category. And so let's explore what type of loan options make sense for you. And it's just about putting you in touch with the right lender. So generally, Dean, we've expedited the process because these are lenders that they're used to working with our clients. We can, instead of you having to talk, and you can use whatever lender you want to, right? But our goal is to try to put you in touch with the right lenders based on what we know about your situation and the vast network of lenders that we have. But we try to put you in touch with the right people that will know the game, understand your situation, and help expedite the process. For example, that 5% down product that we were just talking about, that is with a handful of specific credit unions that are hyper local to areas, and yes, they only lend in their areas. But we know that the products they lend on specific products, which are new construction, single family houses, and that's what we offer. And so we know with that particular product, that is an opportunity for someone to come in with significantly less money down to acquire that asset. Now the person still has to, at least in that scenario, they still have to qualify for that loan. They have to meet DSCR requirements. They have to meet debt yield and DTI requirements. I mean, you just got to turn in your financials. That's not always the case, but in this particular case, it's a high leveraged loan. And this is not a scenario where you're adding value, as you were mentioning, where you're creating a scenario where you're pulling money back out of it and ultimately into like you're just walking and buying a new construction house and putting 5% down that you're not going to live on. You're immediately going to rent out to a tenant. So they want to make sure that you're a strong candidate
Yeah.
to lend to. So your stuff needs to be in check. But there's a whole list of different lenders that we try to present based on what we know about your goals and your financial situation.
Yeah, makes sense. Hey, what's up, guys? If you want to learn more about how you can join my community where I'm going to work with you hands-on, make sure you click that link down below. Let's go. For someone that's looking to buy rentals, how much money do you need to be making, or how much money do you need to have to consider buying rentals and getting into the game of building your wealth?
This is a question that could vary quite a bit depending on where you're buying, what your strategy looks like. I mean, if you're scrappy and creative, and I know that you work with a lot of investors going through creative financing and wholesaling and coaching them through that, man, you can get really creative with stuff. But generally, if you are buying, just say you have income and whether or not you want to be a hands-on type of investor, if you're just looking to grow your investment portfolio, if you're looking to just buy a property, generally speaking, I would say about 20% down. That's just general conventional financing terms is what you would anticipate to put down. And I think that's a good amount to put down on a property if you're not doing anything creative or you're not doing a value add scenario, because then you can ensure that the property has equity going into it, is likely going to cash flow well. If you're buying in the right market, the banks will usually want 6 months of expense and mortgage reserves in the bank. So, maybe say with one of the Midwest, $150,000 properties, you maybe need 5 or 6K in reserve that the bank would require in addition to the down payment. I think that's sufficient on a property that's recently been renovated. If you're buying a house that needs renovation or is older, like maybe you need to budget in higher reserves and capital expenditures and things like that. But I would say most people, like a lot of our investors, they tend to be people that are either brand new investors and they just need a little bit of hand holding, learning how to invest for the first time, or investing out of state. If they live in a really expensive market and it's just the barrier of entry is too high for them, or if they're a high paid professional, or just even there's a person that works a W-2 or regular income and they want to own rental real estate, but they don't necessarily want to build their own team from the ground up. If you're just buying rental real estate in that regard, $20,000 to $30,000 is kind of the bare minimum to use as a down payment, in addition to some reserves. That's kind of typically what we see.
Okay.
And you can use a HELOC, you can use a retirement vehicle. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean you can partner with people, right? I mean, everyone runs out of money at some point in time for down payments. And so it's what other resources are available? How creative can you be with partnerships or accessing other lines of credit or things like that to continue to scale? I mean, all about that. That's the game.
Yep. So I heard you kind of touch on this earlier before, but I assume there's different goals or outcomes that you would have with buying a rental property. Let's talk through, buying for cash flow, buying for tax reasons. What are the different approaches that there are, and which one's right for which person?
And I want to misspell a common myth out there. A lot of people will think that it has to be either or. The common misconception is cash flow or appreciation, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. And I would say that's definitely not the case if you're in the right market. Now, it is a spectrum, and you need to be conscious about that. But there certainly are markets out there. And if you're looking at your local market and you're saying, man, I'm just going to have to buy this property and hope it goes up and appreciates over time and I have to put 50% down to make it cash flow, maybe open your eyes to look at other markets or things like that, because there certainly are markets where you do cash flow well and they have appreciation, but it is a spectrum. Like the Midwest, for example, would be more of a cash flow market, while the Southeast is still a positive cash flow market, but it's an appreciation market. And guess what? Those rents are increasing on average 8 to 10% year after year. And so maybe in 3 years, it's a crazy cash flow market, but it may not start as a cash flow market year one. Being forward thinking is so important. And so many newer investors, Dean, I think, lose sight of that. They're just looking at a pro forma. They're just looking at year one potential performance. And they really lose sight of, or they don't know how to conceptualize and think about future returns. But all right, to answer your question, I go on these tangents sometimes, so reel me back in if you need to. But a cash flow property, this is something that we would consider like a Midwest property where you're at least $200 to $300 a month net. Now we do some short-term rentals and some mid-term rentals as well. Now cash flow is usually higher on those, but it varies quite a bit. But those are areas where you would want to see that 10% cash on cash return or higher. It's a lower price point, things like that. Appreciation market is just that, where it's a higher price point. You would expect to put more money down, but you're anticipating. You're not trying to live off of that cash flow as quickly. And I think most people are probably in that case as well. Most people are not trying to live off of cash flow today, but you really need to understand your timeline and your resources. I think that's where it makes sense to look at what to match the right property with your goals is understanding, all right, am I investing for cash flow because in 3 years I want to have X amount of dollars at $5,000 a month to cover my expenses or whatever the case is? If so, then let's reverse engineer that goal and try to be strategic around acquiring properties to meet that goal. If you're trying to reach a certain level of financial independence or net worth, that is usually expedited through growth areas through appreciation. So let's focus on investing in those areas. It is, I think, a good balancing act to own multiple different assets kind of spread across these areas because your cash flow properties can be your juice to squeeze out of those and reinvest in growing areas. But you did mention the tax play, and people usually as they evolve in their wealth creation and develop, especially as they get into business around real estate or other things, it's interesting because this is a transition I see a lot of people follow. Very early on in their investing, they invest for cash flow because that's tangible to them. It's helping them solve an immediate issue where they can live off of that. They can replace an income, maybe for a spouse. They can pay down expenses. Then people start to become a little bit more comfortable with the cash flow that they have, where they can be a little bit more long-term oriented, thinking about more of growth markets. All right, I've got my little oil wells, my houses in these areas producing X amount of dollars cash flow. Now, how do I scale this thing and grow my net worth? And they tend to be a little bit more appreciation focused. And then the third level is once investors get a hang of that, they match that with the tax benefits. And they really take that's where people create multi-million dollar net worths and generational wealth, financial independence, and create that for generations to follow because they really actually learn the tax benefits. And hopefully this cost segregation bill is reinstated where we get 100% bonus depreciation through 2025, because that certainly will make taxes a lot easier. But I mean, real estate is a beautiful thing because you can create consistent residual income through cash flow. You can use leverage, other people's money, to grow your portfolio. And it's the most tax efficient investment vehicle out there. You can, earn income both through the property and active business. And if you buy enough real estate, like we do, we can accelerate our depreciation on the properties and create a loss where we remove all of our taxable liability year after year. That just gives you so much more money to then reinvest by other tax efficient vehicles, and you get this snowball effect. So,
Yep.
it evolves over time, and that was a super long answer, Dean. So apologize about that. But I get passionate once we start talking about the tax stuff because that's changed our lives dramatically.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think you were talking about doing this across a couple different markets. What's your take on somebody choosing one market, like if they're going to invest out of state and not in their backyard? What's your take on somebody saying, all right, I'm going to get really focused and I'm going to make this new place my new backyard. I'm going to get intimately familiar. I'm going to focus all my effort and energy, all my relationships, and spending their time in that one market versus potentially buying multiple properties over different markets. Do you think it's better to be concentrated and minimize their the chances of them being stretched too thin, or do you feel like it is okay for one reason or another to be in multiple different places at once?
But the short answer is both, but it's how you approach it. I think it's a beautiful thing when someone can get hyper focused in a new market, but I think I would approach them to try to have the mindset that they're doing that not to be their only market forever. And I think that would be a foolish thing because real estate is dynamic. I love the idea of rolling up your sleeves and understanding the market as your own, as you mentioned, your new backyard. But when you do that, build a system around it so you can replicate it to another market and just understand that that market could change, right? So why do you want all your eggs in one basket? But I do like the idea of really understanding a local market. With the investors that we work with, it could be either approach. Some people want to be hyper focused in a certain area to start investing out of state, and we support that, and I like that idea. But we always remind them that's not the end goal. The end goal is to always be likely diversified across a few different markets. More often than not, people will start at least investing with us because we provide a service where you get easy access to be able to, you know, invest in a few different markets. Like if you're doing this on your own, probably the first scenario is better for you, right? Because it would be chaotic to try to invest in two or three different markets and try to really understand those on your own to begin with. Um, but we do have a lot of investors that they'll invest in two or three different markets to start. And I think that I think that is really a beneficial thing for them to do because it adds perspective. Because they get to compare and contrast and say, hey, this market actually is performing after 6 to 12 months. This team in this market is doing quite well. Maybe I want to continue to scale there. Whereas if you went deep into one market, you wouldn't have that perspective. You wouldn't know otherwise. But ultimately, the goal is to have economies of scale in the market, but also diversify across multiple different markets. Like we kind of use this saying, like, this is very loose because it depends on the person, but like 3 to 5 properties in 3 to 5 markets. So you want to have, I think, over time, you want to be diversified across multiple markets, but you also want to have economies of scale in each one of these markets where you have established teams. And I'm saying these in generalities. Obviously, this can be tailored towards a specific person based on their goals and depending on what makes sense for you. But I do like the idea of having economies of scale in each area, but also diversifying. You certainly don't want to own 20 doors across 20 different markets. That's insanity. But I also wouldn't have 20 doors in just one market long term.
Hmm. Okay, now you got me thinking when you talked about doing a 1031 exchange earlier, and I believe that was out of the properties that you owned in North Dakota. Is that right?
I mean, we do 1031 exchanges almost every single year at this point, just because we've acquired so much that we've we have equity in those, and that's the plan. You just trade up bigger and better things, and also that's a way to act to grow your portfolio without putting in any more capital. But yes, we did some 1031 exchanges from some of those North Dakota early properties, and that was the first time we're like, hey, our portfolio just doubled in size or tripled in size without injecting any more capital,
Hmm.
just letting real estate do what it does.
So that's where I'm going with this is to hear your thoughts and what your game plan is with the properties that you do acquire and you let it do its thing. You let it cash flow, you let it appreciate, create some equity, create more wealth. At what point do you think it makes sense to 1031 exchange and trade up to potentially a now more expensive market or you know, basically starting over with whatever that asset is and creating new equity in it versus just sitting on it and holding it for the long term. What's your approach and strategy for all of that?
I think you need to be doing a check-in on your portfolio every 6 to 12 months. And if you're not, there could be missed opportunity. There is such a thing as return on equity, and you need to know how to calculate that, right? And as you accrue equity in a property, and as time goes on, your return on equity is lower, just from the nature of how the calculation works. So it's important to understand like what is your end goal and be working towards that. A lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with holding a property for 30 years, letting the loan pay off, and hey, now it's cash flowing great. But do you want to scale your portfolio? Do you want to maximize your return on investment? Then probably, if you're in the scalability mode, then the important thing to do is check in on your portfolio every 3 to 6 months. Do a check, do a market test. What type of equity do I have in this property? What other opportunities are there out there? Does it make sense? What am I doing in my business and my investing path? And then you just make that decision at that point in time. And then I put it in the back of your head. At least this is what we do, right? With the idea of like, hey, if there's an opportunity that comes up, maybe we could sell an asset to acquire that. But every 6 to 12 months, we're evaluating our portfolio, looking at an equity position on average. And I would say that this is a common path that a lot of our investors follow. On average, people are holding properties probably 4 to 6 years, at least with the investments that they're buying with us. And then they're 1031 exchanging that to grow their portfolio. Now, there could be some tax play into that, but between that 4 to 6 year time frame, probably what we're seeing, I think that why that's an important milestone is the tenant has paid down enough of the loan for them. So they built significant equity in the property through the tenant paying the loan down, the house appreciating year after year. They obviously have their initial down payment that they can access as well, depending on where the market's at. That's another thing, right? Market timing. And this is, I'm not saying time the market. I'm saying be conscious of the market cycle that you're in. Maybe if you sat on the sidelines not selling over the past 2 years because there wasn't a lot of buyer activity because of interest rates, that's okay. That's probably going to change over the next 1 to 2 years. So maybe now is a time to start considering liquidating and checking in on your portfolio. But we always want to just keep tabs on it, right? And looking at what our growth trajectory looks like. As I mentioned a while ago, everyone runs out of capital, right? You will run out of down payments on properties at some point in time, like we all do. And so what other access do you have for capital, equity in houses? And how does that come into your play of growing your portfolio? And it's a cool point to be where your properties are buying properties and you're trading up and like 3xing your cash flow and net worth going through 1031 exchanges. And oh, by the way, now you just bought, 3x the amount of real estate, and now you can do accelerated depreciation on those and create a huge loss. And now you don't have to pay this huge tax expense because taxes are the biggest expense that all of us will always pay. And then now you can actually make an investment worth that and have an infinite return on investment. So just look at it, I think, every 6 to 12 months.
All right, let's take a quick break from the podcast. If you're a real estate investor that's just getting started or struggling to find that next deal, I have just the thing that's going to help you get the breakthrough and the results you've been looking for. I have a free training that I want to share with you that shows you how to find deals, negotiate deals, and get paid. All you have to do is go over to deanrogers.com/training to gain access to this free training. Now let's get back to the podcast. Let's go. The ultimate goal of buying rentals is retirement. So how do you approach being able to create early retirement through buying these rentals?
Retirement is one of those terms that people hear about and no one really understands what that picture looks like for them. There's some people that think retirement is never working again. Some people view retirement as being able to pay your expenses, quit your job. To me, retirement is just a word. Now, this is in our business, right? Rent to retirement is the idea of acquiring cash flowing rental properties to achieve early retirement. But real estate there's no question about this, and I know that you would agree with me, Dean. Real estate is the most predictable path to creating wealth. It's one of the oldest forms of investing because, especially when you're talking about residential real estate, because you're investing in a human necessity. People need housing, right? And when you can serve them and provide that for them, and in an area, especially where there's an undersupply, I mean, you're investing in a human necessity. Real estate is the most predictable path to wealth, but that does not mean it happens overnight. We've built a tremendous portfolio. We have a large 8-figure portfolio at this point that cash flows well into the 7 figures net every single year. And I state that not because from a bragging standpoint, but to state that is not what we set out to do with my personal investing with my wife and I. But that's where we found ourselves as we continue to invest it every single year. And we've been investing professionally for about 15 years now. It doesn't happen overnight, but people can create financial independence through real estate investing, and it doesn't take a lifetime either. So where I'm going with this is that within a few short years of dedicated and intentional investing, having a goal and following those goals and staying consistent to acquiring properties, even when some properties lose money, God forbid you lose money on some deals, like you'll have some bad deals, but still staying consistent to buy rental properties in the right locations with the right teams, it's pretty much a guaranteed path to create wealth. Now, how fast you get there really depends on how aggressive you want to be, how many different ways that you can partner with people and raise capital if that's something you want to do. But sometimes for retirement, real estate just serves a purpose as a supplemental retirement. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If people just want to own 1 or 2 houses, or maybe it's a child's college tuition, right? Where they're going to go to school in 15, 20 years. Like, that's okay. I'm not saying you have to build this tremendous, massive portfolio because everyone on social media will tell you that's what they're doing. real estate serves different purposes for different people. And it's a tremendous way if you learn it and understand it and you build a strategy that it can allow you to expedite your financial goals and allow you to achieve those much quicker than you probably would through other means of investing. And so I don't know if I even answered your question about retirement, but that's a dynamic, fluid process and question for each person. And I would say figure out what your retirement looks like and how real estate figures into that, right? If it does at all.
Yeah. No, it's for me was the better game to play than trying to do the 401k or whatever it is. Um, I mean, there's so many more things that you can do with it. It's a appreciating asset that you get to get benefit from all the tax depreciation, um, and you're getting cash flow from it. I mean, I don't. There's nothing else that I know that does that, right? So
Nope.
that's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy that you can have an asset like that. And what's crazier is that sometimes you can acquire those assets with little to none of your own money if you can get creative, like you were talking about. So that in itself makes it more exciting and a game worth playing, figuring out.
Yeah, I certainly think so. We interview a lot of wealthy and successful people, Dean, yourself being one of them, right? But we sent out a survey to some of the top tier investors that are in our network, and kind of looked at the things that have made them be successful. And like out of all these 100 questions, identify the top five of how you've reached this huge success in rental real estate and what you've done. And it kind of boiled down to these main core concepts. And I would agree with a lot of this as well, and I'll add my own 2 cents. But what we first found is that people, obviously, you got to start investing, right? But the big thing is that people were intentional. All these successful investors, they were intentional on where they were investing. So they were investing in good areas with good teams, but they were diversified, but they were intentional on where they were investing. This could be your local backyard if you had the right strategy, right? And you're intentional. But they started investing and they were intentional on where, those are two separate ones. They started investing and they were intentional on where they were investing. The next thing that we found out is they use leverage, big surprise, but leverage makes real estate way more powerful than any other asset class. I mean, think about this for a minute. You can leverage other people and other people's money, i.e., the bank, to buy an asset that you get 100% of the benefits from, both from a tax standpoint and an appreciation standpoint, cash flow standpoint. But you get 100% of the benefits of this asset that you're borrowing someone else's money to own, that someone else is going to pay off for you, right? The tenant is going to pay that loan off for you. And so some of those deals, yeah, you could be in little to no money down. The next thing that people talked about to build tremendous wealth is they maximize their tax benefits. So I think we covered that one enough, like, with all the different things, but real estate has so many more tax advantages than any other asset class. They reinvested their equity. And so that's something we also covered, right? Like, all of my point is that all these things that wealthy people are doing, we just covered on this show. This is the recipe to wealth long term. So they reinvested their equity. They sold properties. They 1031 exchanged it. That's mixing with the tax benefit. They took HELOCs out on properties. They didn't just let equity sit stagnant in properties. They always used leverage and continued to scale. And then the last thing, the common thing, was that they properly protected their assets, which is important as well. That's about like maintaining, right, and protecting the properties that you own. And so that's probably a different discussion for a different day, but you certainly need to make sure you're operating this like a business, treating it like a business, and protecting it like a business. But I mean, that's pretty much the recipe to success, long term. And if you do some of those things and consistently over time, it's a guaranteed path to wealth.
Yeah, I love that. What are the things that you guys are focusing on right now? So you guys have built your rental portfolio, to an impressive level. As you're working through your own strategy, right? Separate from what your clients' strategies are, but what your specific strategy is, what are the things that you're trying to do right now? Is it more single family? Is it more commercial or apartments? Is there a specific strategy that you're implementing and taking action on right now that you're excited about?
I'm most excited about this cost segregation coming back because that has saved us millions of dollars. So hopefully that's the case. But really, our transition or our I guess our journey in investing started in residential, and we still own the majority of our properties in residential. And this is single family and small multifamily. And I feel like that is the most predictable investment out there. Again, you're investing in housing, right? People need housing, especially if you're intentional on the locations you're investing. We're not doing like crazy luxury property. This is bread and butter housing, rental property housing. Those are just solid, bread and butter producing cash flow properties. Will always maintain a level of those. But I did get to a point, Dean, where I had like over 150 doors, and it was too much. Right, even having property managers and having an asset manager oversee the property, it was just too much. And so I was like, all right, we're going to trade up some of these. And so we 1031 exchanged a lot of those, and then we turned them into multifamily housing a little bit, but more so into commercial retail. And a lot of that transition happened between the 2018 to 2020 period of time, where we went through a lot of those exchanges. And because of the 2017 Tax Act, we were able to acquire and do some of the accelerated depreciation on those, which was a huge tax play. And man, that was a huge benefit. And then that kind of changed the trajectory of our investing, where we will maintain a certain level of residential housing, but a lot of what we're buying now is specifically tax type of incentive properties. We do own a large portfolio of luxury single family type of short-term rentals. This is out in Colorado in the mountains here. I mean, that's just a little niche that we like, where we cater to high-level clients with luxury type housing, but we run cost segregation on those. We have a lot of commercial retail centers. I think about 11 centers out here in northern Colorado. This is just personally what we own. And we bought those specifically for tax purposes. Those are really low cap rates, but we buy those with the intention of offsetting our taxable liability. And we know that they're stabilized assets, triple net leases, and those will continue to, just be predictable over time. But we didn't get there. We didn't get to that point just immediately. We transitioned over time. But I mean, the tax aspect, just to run through the numbers. If anyone's hearing this and they're wondering like cost segregation, like what is that if that's too high level? That's okay. But let me just run through a scenario of what we typically see. So if you bought $1 million property and you ran accelerated depreciation, your bonus depreciation on that, we generally see between 30 to 35% accelerated depreciation. That means, and you have an engineer do this report, and they say that like, okay, whatever these list of things in here do not have a lifespan. On commercial, it's whatever it is. I think it's 37, 39 years for depreciation versus the 27 and a half years. So these 15 items are not going to last 39 years. Okay. And they're going to last 15 years, carpet, all these things. And so you can take accelerated depreciation on that, and you can do that in year one. And it being a real estate professional, because that's what our core business is. Beautiful thing about working in a business in real estate is that you get to do those things. You can take that against all your active income. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. My wife doesn't work anymore, but if she was still working as an optometrist, all that income, I can take that deduction on. So 30 to 35% of $1 million property, that's $300,000 to $350,000 of tax deductions immediately off of our taxes that year. That could equate to whatever, 150 or more of actual taxes that we would have to pay and never see again. Instead, we get now, guess what? That's a down payment on another property that I can do a whole nother cost segregation on. We get our return on investment is like 1,000% or sometimes infinite, because we're actually saving more in taxes when we used it as a down payment on our next property. Now, understand that you need to make sure you have reserves for this. Depreciation is recapturable if you sell it, but you can 1031 exchange that. You can perpetually defer depreciation taxes forever, and if you pass it off to your children, they get step-up basis. That's how people create generational wealth in rental real estate. But even on a small scale, if you bought a $100,000 property, that's going to be a $30,000 to $35,000 tax deduction that year. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
So that's the benefit. That's how people build and compound wealth, growing a portfolio over time, and that's exactly the path that we'll keep continuing on as long as we can with these tax benefits.
Yeah. That's the ninja stuff that once you get in the game just gets you excited, and you want to just keep finding out how to tweak it, make it better, and play the game. They created the game. Let's play it.
Learn the rules, first of all, and
Yeah.
then get in the game, man. So many people sit on the sidelines, and they're just, I know you deal with all these people. And if you're if you're someone that's been sitting on the sidelines and you need some assistance, like, Dean, I've seen what you've done with people and helped them create tremendous amounts of wealth and you got to get into the game, however you got to do it. If it's buying a passive property or a semi-passive property, because that's low hanging fruit for you, fantastic. If you need personal coaching, if you want to be creative and you're scrappy and you're willing to work and build it, then I mean, hire coaches, but get out there and do something. Get into the game and yeah, learn the rules. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Best source is just go to our website. That's renttoretirement.com, renttoretirement.com. If you're listening in the car, you can text REI to 33777 to get on our email dispo list. But yeah, we put out a lot of information. We have our podcast, we have our YouTube channel. We put out a lot of information about all things rental real estate related, a lot of market analytics. So if you just want to learn about different markets throughout the country, we have a lot of resources for you to learn how to, evaluate different markets, to see where it might be a good start for you. And if you're interested to look at some turnkey investment properties, I mean, we usually start with a call with our investment strategist to learn about your goals and criteria and help you map out a plan. That's where we go.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for being on, sharing so much valuable information. Guys, make sure you connect with Zach. Find a way to get more information, to get more involved. You got to take action. That's the only way that you're going to get all the benefits we talked about. So thanks so much for being on. Until next time, peace.